The real activity on the project at this point in time is installation of the 30-inch pipeline from the well field towards San Angelo. The contractor on the project has brought in 2 pipelaying crews. They initiated their construction activities about 5 miles east of Eden, which is about the midpoint of the project. It gives them about 30 miles each direction from that point there. The contractors' initial activities were somewhat slower than they anticipated because they started right on top of the hill, and generally on top of hills where you run into some of your worst rock areas. The production was a little bit slower, but we have seen a definite improvement in that, and they are moving along at a very good pace right now on installation of the pipeline. At this point in time, they started the project around the 1st of June on that. They have probably close to 6 miles of pipeline in the ground, and the substantial completion date for having the pipe in so that it could be placed in service is this time next year, around July of 2013. It will be available to start delivering water to San Angelo. On the treatment, for the Hickory water supply project, we looked at 2 different treatment processes. One of them was the ion exchange process, just a filtration of the water to remove the radium. The other was to use reverse osmosis to not only remove the radium, but to remove all the total dissolved solids within the water. Both of the processes proved very effective in removing the radium. The significant difference between the 2 processes, though, is with the ion exchange, you have 99% of water recovery. That means that if you put 100 gallons through the system, you get 99 gallons out of the other side of the system, and the radium's removed to below EPA standards. On the reverse osmosis side of the treatment, if you put 100 gallons into the system, you get 90 gallons out of the backside of the system. So you have about a 10% loss or 10% reject of the water going through the system, which is very typical with an RO system. That the water that's coming off that is the water that then has the highly mineralized water that that system produces like that. So in looking at the 2 different processes, the council considered both of those. Both of them were very effective, but in the long term, I think the important factor is the water we produce from this well field is very important to be able to maximize every drop of water we get. So the selected method for treatment of this water is the ion exchange method, which will be moving forward then for the design of that facility for treatment of this water. Kind of the general time frame for doing that is we're beginning the final design for that right now. It should be completed right after the 1st of 2013. We'll be out to bids the early part then, January, February, March of 2013, and have the contract awarded by the spring of next year. It'll take approximately 1 year then to build that facility and to have it online and operational to be able to treat and remove the radium from the water from the Hickory project then. The other part of the project is the actual equipping, installing pumps and motors within the existing 9 wells and the building of the booster pump station. The contract for those improvements was awarded in May by the City Council. The contractor has been given the notice to proceed on that project. He is going through the stage right now on submitting all the different type of materials and equipment that he'll be utilizing on that for the review before we actually give the go-ahead to start ordering and placing that equipment into service like that. So within 30 days, we anticipate he'll be mobilizing to the site to begin site preparation, construction of the entrance roads to the booster pump station, and beginning some of the excavation work for where the pump cans will be set and the building will be installed for the station itself. So that contract will also take about 1 year to complete. So July of next year, it'll be operational, which will coincide with the pipeline. So everything is revolving around that July of 2013 date to have it the way water can be brought into the city. Thank you for this time to let you see what we have going on here in San Angelo as far as development of another water supply source. From when this video was done, we've seen considerable progress. Whenever you start something and it doesn't go right at first, you certainly become apprehensive real quick, and that was kind of where we at after the contractor started there in late May and June, ran into the problems with the rock, but fortunately somebody was watching out over us, and we've been able to get through that part of it, and the contract at this point in time is almost right on schedule, so he's picked up over 30 days here in moving ahead with that. But this project here really, I think, exemplifies what's going on in West Texas right now. It's one of three major projects underway to develop water resources for the West Texas area here. The city of San Angelo on this one is putting in a little over 60 miles of pipeline. The city of Midland right now is putting in a little over 70 miles of pipeline to develop a well field to the west of their community. The Colorado Municipal Water District is doing a project installing over 40 miles of pipeline to develop a well field. All of these projects, over 175 miles of pipeline, more than $300 million in investment of infrastructure in our communities going on at this point in time to bring close to 50 million gallons of water per day at that potential for our cities, for our communities here. In doing that, though, as my friend Judge Bearden from Brady was saying, it takes a tremendous cooperation between communities to keep those lines of voices going back and forth so that we know what each other is doing, so that we know we're trying to help each other and not one community against another community. There is a very big challenge that we face here. We have at this point in time also, not only within our area here, but the cities of San Angelo, of Abilene, and the Midland, our mayors about a year ago got together and said, hey, we need to look as a West Texas region, what can we do beyond our own communities in trying to secure water supplies for our area here in West Texas. So we formed the Tri-Cities Coalition and have been working together now to identify those potential water supply sources that can now enhance our abilities to deliver water between all the cities. And it may be those things where Abilene develops a water project, but now they share their water through Ivy, which they would not need with the cities of Midland or San Angelo or the Colorado Municipal Water District cities. So we're beginning to see now that coalition develop so that not only are we looking at what we have available for our own sources, but what can we do between those other cities. As part of the state plan, beginning in 1998 when the state legislature enacted the regional water planning process, I've had the fortunate opportunity to have served on that. And it's amazing what we've seen happen over that time, and it's really a good process that the state legislature has put in place to help that. That initial meetings were really amazing. We're in what's called Region F. We cover 32 counties from Brown County all the way out to Pecos County, everything through the mid-central part of West Texas right here. Initially, there was a lot of mistrust. We had rural, we had the cities, we had environmental, we had all different competing needs coming together at that point in time to look at what are the requirements, what do we need to look at right there. So over this time period, over the last 12 to 14 years, there's been a real cohesion brought together, particularly in this West Texas, in the Region F, on the interest of what everybody needs as far as their water. And I think we're seeing that cooperation. You know, at one time we heard there were cities against the agricultural against the environmental. And it's amazing how these things have really been brought together as we've worked together as a regional water planning group here to see what are the needs and how can we help each other on this. Because we're here, you know, with the limited voice, the limited representation we have on a state, even on a federal level anymore, we have to come together as regional communities here and look beyond our own needs and how we can work together. Because looking in your backyard to try to find that water resource, those days are long gone. We look now at resources, what I would call secondary resources. We've developed the primary sources, those that bring water to your community the first time, a lake, an aquifer. Those are about gone. There are a few left around the state, but they're limited and they're very expensive projects, which will take coalitions of communities like we're looking with the Tri-Cities here to do those projects in the future. Beyond that, though, the secondary use of water, the reuse of water back into the system. So it's very important as we move forward on this that we work together, and I'm very pleased to be a part of that process. And we thank you for your time and seeing what we have going here. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It's a great honor to be back up here and talk about funding and infrastructure. We're renaming this to Show Me the Money is basically what it ought to be. And we have a great panel here today. I want to start out and introduce my colleague in the state Senate, Senator Seliger. Senator Seliger, come on up. Come on down, as they say. Senator Seliger has been a member of the Texas Senate since 2004, He has a really small district of only 26 counties from the Panhandle. He also was a redistricting chairman. That's why he only has 26, and I got 51. Oh, it's gone up to 37. Okay. Bless your heart. Senator Seliger was appointed to chairman of the Senate Select Committee on Redistricting and got some good news today, and is currently serving on the Senate Education Committee, the Senate Finance Committee, and sits right next to me, and is on the Senate Committee on Natural Resources and International Relations and Trade. As a member of the Natural Resources Committee during the 82nd session, Kel worked closely in the areas of groundwater and disposal of low-level radioactive waste. Senate Bill 1504 and Senate Bill 1605 will allow for the importation and disposal of waste and create a new governing and funding structure for the Low-Level Radioactive Waste Compact Commission to ensure effective management of that waste. And Kel truly did a good job on that. It was a tough, thorny political issue, and I was really proud of the way he handled that. As a key leader on groundwater policy, Senator Seliger advanced measures to improve the process for establishing desired future conditions and the management of priority groundwater management areas. Now, prior to his being in the legislature, Senator Seliger was the mayor of Amarillo. And while he was the mayor of Amarillo probably built its water reserves to a level greater than especially any city in the state, and probably as much as any city in the nation. He did a great job of acquiring water rights, and if you want to go to a city that has a water future, go to Amarillo, and it's part of what Senator Seliger did as the mayor there. Our next panelist is Harvey Hildebrand, Texas Tech University. Harvey Hildebrand has been our guest here, or not our guest, one of our hosts here for many years from Kerrville. Harvey was first elected to the House of Representatives in 1988. He's probably the longest serving of all of us up here. In 2011, he was appointed chairman of the House Ways and Means Committee. That is the most important committee in the House with regard to revenue. Now, you've heard a lot of these West Texas guys get introduced, and a lot of our West Texas guys have some very serious and important positions in the state of Texas, and this is one of them. And he's the guy that has to look over all the revenue measures before the Texas House, and all revenue measures start in the House. Thank the Lord. We don't have to do tax bills in the Senate. He also serves as a member of the Redistricting Committee, State Affairs Committee, and the Select Committee on Voter Identification and Voter Fraud. He previously served as a member of the Natural Resources Committee, which oversees the Texas Commission of Environmental Quality, and he served along with our friend Kip Averett on the Legislative Oversight Committee for the Edwards Aquifer Authority. In the private sector, Representative Hildebrand has worked in real estate, ranching, advertising, and business management and marketing, and born in Uvalde, Texas in 1960, and he's a 1983 graduate of Harvard on the Plains, Texas Tech University. State Representative Susan King. Susan was first elected to the House in 2006 and is now serving in her third term representing District 71 up in Abilene. Representative King is a native of Houston who lived in Abilene for more than 30 years. Notice how we all stand up when she walks by. Her Texas political roots, now listen, I thought this was very interesting on Susan. Her political roots connect her to the family of Francis R. Lubbock, the 9th governor of Texas. Now that's pretty neat, especially that last name. Representative King attended the University of Texas at Austin and received a Bachelor of Science degree in nursing and honors, and serves on the House Appropriations Committee, the Article II subcommittee, which deals with health and human services, and that's a very key subcommittee on finance that helps make sure that our rural health clinics and other rural health issues are taken care of. She is on the subcommittee on current financial condition, Public Health Committee, and the House Administration Committee. And Doug Miller, come on back up. Doug did a great job for us this morning. How many panels have you been on today? On our first panel, and
these guys stand up for me.
No, I doubt it. Susan did. All right. Very good. Very good. He was appointed by Joe Strauss, Speaker, as a member of the House Committee on Appropriations and Natural Resources, and previously served in House Administration. And he has served as a mayor and a councilman of New Braunfels and a member of the Regional State Water Planning Group. And as you know, was the chairman of the Edwards Aquifer Authority whenever it was established, and worked with the legislature to establish that. I consider him an expert on the way the Edwards Aquifer Authority works, why it's there, the history of it, and also issues of infrastructure as well. He worked with Buster Brown on Senate Bill 1, which is the Senate bill that put together and started all of this water planning that we're doing and we'll be talking about later today, and was a charter member of the Regional Water Planning Group. Ken Martin. Mr. Martin, come on down. Ken he's received his Bachelor of Science degree in Civil Engineering from Harvard on the Plains, and started his career in engineering with Freese and Nichols Engineering, and currently president of Jacobs and Martin Consulting Engineers. He has 38 years of consulting engineering business, which is focused primarily on municipal water and wastewater projects. And finally, Jeff Walker with the Texas Water Development Board. Jeff serves as the Director of Project Development for the Texas Water Development Board. His areas of responsibility includes coordination of all applications for funding, water-related infrastructure through the various Texas Water Development Board programs, including financial analysis and formal recommendation of the board. Additionally, his staff is responsible for closing and delivery of project funds. Over the past 4 years, the Water Development Board has made commitments of over $4 billion for funding water and wastewater projects across the state. He received a Master's of Business Administration at Texas State University and has a Bachelor's of Science in Ag Economics from Texas A&M University. So no whoops, no whoops. Okay, that's good. This probably is one of the most, in my view, one of the more important sessions, because we're in, if you don't have the money, you can't do the job. If you don't have the money, you can't even plan the job. And I know Representative Darby and I and others, we're all working with our communities to try to solve these long-term problems that you have with acquiring water resources, revamping your water treatment plants, staying in compliance with TCEQ, with your water quality. And so the first persons we always go to is the Texas Water Development Board. And so I'm going to start out today and ask Jeff Walker, if he would, to kind of describe the infrastructure planning and also construction funding programs that you have over at Water Development Board.
Okay, thank you. It's a little disconcerting to be on a panel with all your bosses really here. So, but the Water Development Board has been created since the 1950s, and the reason they were created was because of the drought of the 50s. People started figuring out we weren't ready for our water needs in the future. So they created the Water Development Board to plan water projects and also to finance them. First loans were made by the board in 1959. And we've got three major funding programs. We've got two what we call state revolving funds, which are subsidized by the federal government, and they're for clean water, which is for wastewater, and drinking water, which is for drinking water. I always say, like Ken said earlier, I kind of want my drinking water to be clean also, so it's kind of a misnomer. But we also have what's called the State Development Fund, and that's our largest, or not our largest, but it's our biggest program and the oldest program. And thanks to the generosity of the legislature and the voters of Texas, we've got $6 billion worth of authorization in that program. So at any time, we can have up to $6 billion outstanding in that program. And like the senator said a while ago, over the last 4 years, we've averaged about $1 billion a year in all three programs combined. Specifically on water projects, surface or supply projects, we've done in the last 4 years $1.4 billion in just new projects. And that's anything from the city of Eden drilling a new well, Robert Lee getting a new emergency pipeline, to the city of San Angelo. In fact, Water Development Board is very proud to be partners in a lot of these projects you've been hearing about today. The San Angelo project, the Colorado River Municipal Water District project, a lot of these projects. So we're very proud to be partners in that. We can fund anything from original planning of a project to the ultimate construction. It's like the San Angelo project. In fact, That project was a part of the what's called the Water Infrastructure Fund, which the legislature funded in 2008, and the past 3 legislatures have funded that, and we've done right at $900 million worth of projects through that fund. We have a request in the upcoming session for another $900 million in projects for that. Just to get an example of the need out there, if you hadn't read the water plan, it says there's $53 billion worth of need for water supply projects to meet our Texas needs in the next 50 years. $53 billion is a lot of money. That is over 50 years, so if you break it down by year, it's about $1 billion a year. So it sounds a little easier, but still, that's a lot of money. And we can't meet it all. We only have $6 billion authorizations, so there's going to be it's a big undertaking. And
how long does $6 billion last?
Depends on how fast it pays off. I mean, it's the rolling type deal. So, but if we continue to if we did $1 billion a year, we would run out pretty soon because those are 20-year loans, so it wouldn't pay back. It would be slow. Right now, we have a portfolio of about in the development fund about $2 billion. But that's ramping up very, very quickly now that we've got these big projects coming in. So
if you were to put a percentage on capacity, and I don't want to put you on the spot, so I know this is what in the finance world we call the swag, but could you give us a little bit of an idea of kind of what is how much do we, as far as that $6 billion, how much do we have, what capacity do we have out of that as a percentage-wise? Are we used about?
We just got that in November. So we haven't started on that $6 billion yet.
Okay, so
we still had a little bit left from the old authorization, so we're about to start on the $6 billion. We haven't started on it yet. So we've got all the $6 billion available right now.
All right.
To meet whatever needs Texas has.
Mr. Martin, as far as engineering is concerned, I guess when communities have to get started and they start looking around, I guess your engineering firms out here in the state of Texas are involved in consulting and helping. Would you kind of describe how that works and how communities get you engaged?
Certainly, and Senator, I'm also mindful of the audience really consists of many small communities, the larger communities and many of the small communities. And when we get involved, hopefully it's in the early stages of planning, and there are a number of consultants that can help the communities, but we would stress more than anything is advanced planning. What Jeff talked about, the money that's available through the Water Development Board, one of the forms that they ask you, and by the way, the criteria for getting funds changes every year. That's not a bad thing, it's just refined. So whether you're going to the Water Development Board or you're going through USDA or the Texas Department of Agriculture, there are a number of agencies that you can access funding. The Water Development Board does a great job of getting funds to communities, but it does take planning. And one of the forms that they have today, what we used to use the terminology shovel ready, is a form called readiness to proceed. And you have to complete that form, and you're advising the state of how quickly can you move on a project, because the money they receive from the federal government, Jeff will testify to the fact that they receive a lot of pressure from the feds to get the money spent. You can get the money obligated, and if you don't spend it, then they threaten to take it back. That's more or less, that's the way it works. And so the pre-planning for any project, first of all, communities, especially smaller communities, I think larger communities take this for granted, but for small communities, planning is essential. The pre-planning of knowing what your needs are, of trying to prioritize what can you do, because it really has to be affordable for the communities. And it depends on what kind of funding, level of funding that you get. The Water Development Board has for disadvantaged communities. They have disadvantaged funds, which they call, in some terms, forgiveness or grant. So the level of funding and the kind of funding that the communities can get. But our involvement, or any consultant's involvement, I would encourage you early on in your stage of trying to identify your needs. There are funds for master plans that communities can access, either through the Water Development Board. Do this planning, identifying all of your needs, and then prioritizing those from a community standpoint. And I'd really strongly encourage you to get your local leaders involved. and make sure that the plan that you develop for your needs of your community reflect really what is needed. And then you start looking for those funding sources. But anything you can do on your own up to the point of making an application for federal or state funds will benefit you. If you are ready to move, as I said earlier, this form about readiness to proceed, if you're ready to say, yes, we're ready, then many times you will move up on the list ahead of other people. So it's not just the funding, but it's also the pre-planning, making sure that you identify your needs, prioritize those needs, and many of the smaller communities have to do that in phases. They cannot do it all at once. And so it's essential, even after the drought is over. And by the way, we will get rain someday, and everyone except West Texas will forget about the drought. The people in East Texas won't think anything about it. But even when the drought is over, the needs are still there because your infrastructure, it may not be water, your infrastructure continues to deteriorate. Just the age of all of the things that have been installed over the years. And so every year you should be planning to replace some of your infrastructure if it's possible.
Well, thank you. I think that's a good segue because, it occurs to me that we can no longer, especially in West Texas, continue to kick the can down the road with regard to our future water problems. And I'll bring me to Senator Seliger, who is mayor. Again, I told you earlier, that community under his leadership decided not to kick the can down the road. I'm sure you got beat up a little bit for that, Senator, as mayor, but describe, if you could, kind of what was the thinking of Amarillo whenever y'all decided to go forward and buy a lot of water rights?
We started with the most important function was to buy into the planning process. City of San Angelo, City of Amarillo, City of Dallas are fine tomorrow. But what about the end of August in 2042 and 2052 and 2062? And so we began looking at the water resources were available. We were one of the 11 member cities, along with Lubbock in the Canadian River Municipal Water Authority, and decided we had to go and get those water rights, and we did it. We, along with the city of Midland and other cities, have started the process of really monetizing water. We're starting to determine what water really is worth intrinsically and its market value. And it was simply a question of the planning process that the gentleman at the end of the table is talking about. It is absolutely essential and in some respects more important when we talk about water supply and distribution than in any other function because a planning window is by necessity very long. There are going to be a number of reservoir sites, 26 now, but that number changes all over the state of Texas, primarily, not exclusively, serving urban areas. And if you take something like Dallas-Fort Worth, in some respects, the only way they have to go are reservoirs. If they started today, it'd take about 30 years to get the first drop out of those. They have got to start today, not only determining all of those details, not just where it goes, but how you do mitigation and compensation as you condemn property. And we have got to move forward there. We already found in the last 2 years that the federal government put a halt to the Fastrel Reservoir for one reason or another. That comes out of the planning paradigm and something else goes in. But our thought was just simply planning for the future. We are by far the only city or area that has done it. But I think we got started and helped, I think, lend some credibility to a very long-term and even aggressive planning process.
Representative Miller, with regard to planning, I know you served as charter member of the Regional Water Planning Group. Kind of tie all that together for us and how that works with these communities and how they should be aware of what's been going on there.
Thank you, Senator. And it's really true. Up until that point in time, and Jeff spoke about the fact that after the drought of the 50s, the Water Development Board, or whatever the agency was called at that particular time, was charged with the responsibility of coming up with plans for the water supply and the water needs for Texans. But today, after Senator Brown's SB 1, we're all in this. Everybody has board members out there. It's a prescription in that statute that says that all the interests are going to be involved, such as industrial, large cities, small cities, agriculture, environmental, and then each of the regions has advisors certainly from the Water Development Board, which is charged with the responsibility of this planning task, but also Parks and Wildlife, the TCEQ, on and on. So the projects that we're talking about that need to be developed for our water needs and for our supply are your projects, are your community's projects that are put forth. And unless the process has changed, the water to receive funding from your agency, it has to be part of the water plan. Is that right?
It has to be, yes, sir.
And so a project is that might be funded or could apply for funding would be one that peer-to-peer and within a region, people have agreed that this is something that's needed, that they can support as regional leaders. And the struggle comes, now maybe not for communities like a Houston or San Antonio or Dallas, and maybe not to put those alone, but all those communities being in excess of 1 million people. But it's a struggle for some of us. I saw the mayor, Robert Lee, here, and I know we've got some other small community mayors, and I was on the New Braunfels Utility Board. It's hard for us to come up with the money sometimes to pay for these projects. And I think that's when we talk about funding the state water plan. What we're doing, I think we, as citizens and Texans, we don't want the state to be writing checks to us for our projects and telling us, because if we're writing the checks, we're going to tell you what projects to do. I think the process we have, the bottom-up process we have today is great. And what we need to be as state leaders is we need to be helping create the money that's available on a low-cost basis for you through the Water Development Board to fund these projects to supply your needs. There's some $53 billion, we've heard the number today, and we looked at it from the House Natural Resources Committee, worth of needs out there. Now, as was said, well, that's probably over the next 50 years. Well, we're going to continue to grow because we've already heard that our population is going to go from 25 or 26 million to close to 50 million people in this state. So there's going to be more needs. So I think what we've got to do is we've got to step up. We had, I think that earlier, Chairman Ritter was here. I believe he plans to introduce legislation again to try to generate some funds so through some way to have enough money to fund these projects. And then that would be, just like the $6 billion would be a revolving fund. Now, one last thing, and then I'll be quiet because I know some other people want to talk, is that when that $6 billion, which was voted on by the people of Texas, it only passed with 51% of the vote. That means only, in my mind, 51% of people in Texas that went out and voted said, that water is that important that we need to put the money up there. So
that was after a drought too, wasn't it?
And that's after a drought too. So, yeah, when it starts raining, it's going to be, under the 50% mark. So those are some of the challenges, and my position, Chairman Ritter's position, is that if we're going to create this fund, we need to take it to the people. We need to have their endorsement and their vote to put that money together for us to help fund their projects.
Representative King, a couple of questions. One is an appropriator. How do you perceive the 32 members of the House Appropriations Committee, which is kind of where a lot of the budget's written? How do you see them with regard to that and this as a priority?
Thank you, Senator. I think it's a good question. And the two biggest budget drivers in the state are healthcare and education. So while we speak about water and how important it is, we're not stepping up and saying this is a critical need that we need to continue to ongoing fund in a big way, in my opinion. And so I think what happens is, it's just like at the convention that was in Fort Worth a few months ago, a particular political party was holding a meeting there. There was a breakout session with regards to water, which had never happened before, because typically there was partisan bickering comments about one party or the other. But in this case, they brought out policy discussions, and water was widely attended. There was probably 600 people in the room. And so again, as Representative Miller said, they said, why aren't we funding the state water plan? And so what do you do? What do you not fund? What do you not deal with to be able to put more and more money into this situation? As you said, 51% on the $6 billion in the constitutional amendments. And I heard the comments over and over in my district, well, if we give them $6 billion now, how much will they want later? Will they continue to ask, or will this just sort of pop up and add more and more money? So people are suspicious of that large a sum of money being put somewhere, even though we know that water is, along with air, the only two non-negotiables that we have. So whereas it is so critical, and we talk about it so much here, I think the reality has not sunk into people. Yes, we see marquees that say pray for rain and be careful with your water and everything, but is it a true mindset? Is it a true way of life? Farmers and ranchers know. You sell your cattle off too early because you have no water. You can't have enough water for your crops. When there are wildfires that take the water when they come over with the helicopters and dip your tanks. And by the way, if your tank's dipped without your permission, which typically it is because there's not a big warning there, you can apply to TxDOT for them to return the water if it's available. So that was a question in my area. So to your question and to your point, I think it's kind of like when your house is broken into and that's when you buy your security system. Or when you go in and you have a heart attack or something worse as a patient, and that's when you change your diet. And that's when you might do something else to change your habits. So I do think we obviously know that it's a huge priority, but will we step up and change the funding that we have in other places, or perhaps do the forbidden, which would be to tap into the Economic Stabilization Fund, or with all due respect to the lack of, it is also called the Rainy Day Fund.
Or lack of rainy day fund.
Yes, and we'd like to have it. Maybe it would be the un-rainy day fund, but the point being is that was designed to deal with problematic situations in our budget. But as of late, it seems to be something that we want to tightly hold on to. Thank you to the oil and gas industry for bringing it to us. But I guess I answered my question with the fact that I think we realize it, but will we step up and do something definitive from now on ongoing? I'd like to know how many people in this room think they'll be here in 2060. I'm pretty sure I won't be here. So it's our job to be good stewards of our money and our non-perfect, plentiful resources, but we love our West Texas. So I think it's a time it will be a tough decision. And with school finance and certainly the Health Care Affordable Care Act, which is not affordable, but we call it affordable, there's huge, huge demands on our revenues. And I haven't seen many people recently that are raising their hand to raise revenues, but I think at some point it will have to happen.
Perfect segue to the next guy
That would be you.
who is the gatekeeper for raising revenues. Chairman Hildebrand, what's your comment on this? What's your take? As a person who stays on top of the revenue of this state and the revenue needs and efficiencies and things like that, and I don't think in this room there's probably much disagreement that water is probably under most elected officials, water and our meeting our water needs in this growing state are going to be critical. Tell us where the state is and give us your perspective on that.
Well, we're going to be in a lot better shape than we were the last legislative session. Our forecast, our economic activities continue to grow. We're being led, of course, by the oil and gas industry. Really, when we say oil and gas, really we mean oil in this case, because gas is so cheap that it's one of the only, just a couple of areas of our revenue recovery that is still below or lower than the pre-recession numbers, where sales tax collection actually exceeds the pre-recession historic collection level. So we're doing a lot better. We've been on course for, I guess, since about spring of 2010, when we saw a little bit of an improvement, obviously from 08 and 09 at the end of 09, but 2010 every month was better than 09, and 2011 almost every month was better than 2010, and by the end of the fiscal year, last biennium ended last August 31st, we ended up with $1.1 billion more money in general revenue even though we just had a forecast when we were closing out the session and we weren't able to use that money, but when we finished the fiscal year 2.5 months later, we had 1.1 billion surplus at the end. We had a revised BRE biennial revenue estimate over the one we just got in May that basically raised the forecasted revenue by $2.3 billion. When you add the two together, we look like, if things continue, that we're going to have between $3.5 and $5 billion general revenue surplus. So we're going to be in a lot better shape, where we're in the arguably $25 billion projected deficit last time, depending on which estimate you use. There was estimates below that and estimates above it, but obviously we're in a lot better shape. We'll have more money. We also will have a rainy day fund, the Economic Stabilization Fund, which I was a freshman member of the legislature when we passed the Economic Stabilization Fund, commonly known as the Rainy Day Fund. And the idea there was we took the price per barrel of oil, and we said everything to that point below that goes to general revenue, and anything above it goes in the new Rainy Day Fund. And we had a pretty nice size Rainy Day Fund last session. We used, I guess, 3.2? 3.2. Yeah, 3.2 billion of it, left about 4 billion in it. We, because of the oil industry and how well we're doing in the Permian Basin and Eagle Ford and the Panhandle and other areas of the state, we're going to have some estimate, at least 8 billion and probably closer to 10 billion in our rainy day fund when we go in next session. The next deposit will be made this fall. So we're going to be in a lot better shape. Now, the downside of that is we've got a lot of demands on that. We've got some about 2.2 billion that we have to that we can either fund in the next biennium when we appropriate the next 2 years, or we can, in an emergency appropriations bill in the first 60 days or 90 days of the legislative session, we can restore $2.3 billion in education funding that we deferred to the next biennium. We also are going to owe about $4.7 billion in Medicaid. Now, that would have been a bigger ticket had we funded it last session instead of only partially funding it. We would have owed more then, but because of a waiver and some other dynamics that have happened since, the number dropped about $1 billion less, and there was one estimated it was going to be about $1.5 billion less, but the final number now looks like at about 4.7. So we're going to have some areas that we have to use the available revenue for, but we're going to have money left over after that to begin to fund some of our priorities. And we'll have some claims on that. We'll have what we need to do to invest in water resources, what we need to do to restore funding for to replace the funding that we spent on brush fires, and whether we're going to add more money to public education, and whether we're going to do a lot of other things that are important to Texas and Texas's future. But we are going to be in much better shape. And if that's a priority decision made by a majority in the House and 2/3, then a majority in the Senate, and the governor agrees to that, we'll be able to do some things.
Very good. So I think a hopeful outlook. Of course, compared to next year, it couldn't, or last year, it couldn't be much.
Well, let me add
we
this.
didn't have a very.
Let me add this one thing. Unfortunately, there's a political question here. We're already talking about a national recession that, depending on what happens at the end of the year in Congress and whether there's any agreement between the administration and Congress at the end of the year, that there's predictions of a recession. I'm betting that we'll have a recession almost immediately after the election if we continue to have this administration. And on the other side, if we get a new president, I think without one policy change at the national level, you're going to see some real enthusiasm and some interest in investing in the economy right away and take some of this money that's on the sidelines and put it into the country. Of course, we've been doing well when the rest of the country hasn't done as well, but that would help us. But most concerning to me is if it doesn't go well, a national recession will hurt us. Although us and a number of other states do have the oil industry working for us, it still would impact what we can do next year.
Yeah, I think while we watch these fundamentals in the market and everything, we still have to be mindful and from our perspective as to what it's going to look like from 2 years, because we're not budgeting for tomorrow, we're budgeting for 2 years, and we have to use a crystal ball. The question I have now, and then we're going to kind of throw it open to whatever y'all want to talk about and then some questions, is, and I guess this will be to either Mr. Walker or Mr. Martin, is if you have projects that you need to start in your communities that 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years down the road, you're going to need to make some movement. Is now a pretty good time to get started because we do have funds out there? And I'll just sit that to Mr. Martin first.
Senator, one thing, even before I answer your question, I would like to make the comment, I know Jeff would talk about this, we were talking about the 51% that voted for the $6 billion. I think some people forget that $6 billion is loan money. It's not a handout. It's paid back to the state. And so maybe some of the citizens don't realize it's not a handout, it's a loan that's paid back by the communities. And so, but in answer to your question, is now a good time? Now is a good time, especially when you look at the interest rates for loans that are available, whether it's federal or state funding. It's more affordable, and that's one of the issues, especially for the small communities. The question is affordability and sustainability. Those two things, any project has to be an affordable project. Now, you might say, well, if you're out of water, you just pay whatever you have to. You hate to get in that position. Sometimes we get in that position, but looking from a project, whether it's trying to implement a project over 5 or 6 years or 7 years, it takes such a long time to get to the point normally if you do it right. You have to get started in the regional planning process, but also in the local planning processes, making sure that your citizens are behind the project, and then make sure they're educated about the cost. But when you start pursuing that, the Water Development Board is a big source of funding. It's not the only source of funding. There are other agencies that have funds too. And if there's an opportunity for you to cooperate with an adjoining community, I'd highly encourage you to look into that, because we've seen on a number of examples where communities join together and ultimately it makes it cheaper. As Will Wildy said earlier about three larger cities joining together, even the small communities can join together and share some resources that it makes it ultimately less expensive for the citizens. So now is a good time to be pursuing that funding track, as long as you have your planning done, you have your projects prioritized, and you can continue to do that. But there is really no excuse for a community not to be trying to get funding. You may not be funded every year that you try to get funds, but you need to be trying each year to fund some projects that you have, because every community that I know of has a need for something to be done. It may not be this massive project, but even on the small projects, something needs to be attempted every year. You may not get funded, but for most of the time, trying to get these funds costs very little, or it costs nothing for you to try to get the money that you need to accomplish projects. So I encourage our communities to do it every year, to try to get money every year through whatever source and see if you can make it work.
Jeff?
Like echo Mr. Martin, we're looking at historic low interest rates right now. We're looking at 20-year debt for less than 3%, and that's just unheard of right now. So it is a good time, because like somebody mentioned a while ago, there's a lot of money sitting out there looking for somewhere to go, and these kind of projects are good projects, and they're looking for this type. So,
Senator Seliger?
Yeah, when we talk about planning, it needs to be done and started right now. And a lot of communities are doing it very well. When you look at the things that Midland and its partner cities are doing to provide water for the future, but now is the time to plan it and access those funds. Clearly, the call on those funds is going to be greater in urban areas. They have more people, and they're going to have use for more acre feet per people. But it's also about Seminole to just access $1.2 million of those funds for basic infrastructure replacement and installation. Everybody can use it. Everyone will have access. Those projects need to be consistent with the statewide water plan. we need to be mobile enough to realize there will also be emergency situations like the one encountered by Groesbeck this last year, where it looked like they were going to run out of water in 4 or 5 weeks. But now is the time to plan, and part of that planning is financing, because water projects are so expensive. But a lot of people are doing it now. There's a template that exists now for more communities, and now's a good time to be planning, because you know you're going to need water in the future, every day of the future.
Final question, and I think I'll leave this to the reps. Is regionalization an important concept for these small communities? Susan?
Are you talking about regionalization in the water planning
Right.
districts? Absolutely.
No, as far as coming together and basically.
Oh, absolutely. And Abilene, I think they went to visit a library or something, but I know my Nolan County and perhaps Jones County people are here, although just in, there's no pre-clearance for the state of Texas, so Senator Seliger could discuss that, but we won't.
That was the good news.
Who knows what the districts will be now with that having happened? It's not good news. But yes, I think it is, because people need to have coalitions and consortiums together for people to work. If not, you don't have the same revenue and you don't have the same buy-in from the communities. You know, it really does no good, in my opinion, to have all the water experts here and the elected officials and the people who are in the industry if the regular rank and file people, the taxpayers, are not on board and not understanding what we're doing. So I think when you broaden the scope and have several cities together, we have Midland, San Angelo, and Abilene together working for the good of the region, because with mobility nowadays, people may move to a different place. So it's not just forevermore you're one town. I think it's very important. And I do think that we're uniquely different here than perhaps those in the cities who don't worry about the revenue or the power or the sources, and we can beat that horse all day. But the fact of the matter is, we're here, we choose to live here. I'm a native Houstonian. I don't ever mention that specifically in Sweetwater, because they're not happy about that. But certainly the big cities, they do have the benefit. And I have to say something, that all day we've talked about the 19 state reps west of I-35. Keep in mind, 4 of those 19 are from El Paso. And so typically they're not at the West Texas rural type of meetings. Maybe they're here, I don't know. But that's a unique setting in and of itself. So I think the more collaboration, the more public education, the more people really know what it is. And we're not just flashing around all these terms and these projects and these districts. It's too much for a person who's not in this industry and area to completely understand. When they know that they need water, they want it there, they don't want to have all this discussion. It's our job to help educate them so they can come on board when we do have to put forth the effort for more money or more effort to do and fulfill the needs we need up to 2060.
Okay. Hildebrand.
And I think another factor, considering you had it in your earlier panels, Senator, is that technology and some of the new ways to do infrastructure and the alternatives to desal, for instance. You know, there's some treatments coming along, there's some technology and some new ways to treat water that are going to be a lot less expensive, just like ASR wells that probably Lyle mentioned this morning are, might be a better way to store water, but also treating water. Some of the technologies coming along, not just filtering, but actually applying treatment that causes bad molecules, chloride, sodiums, and other things to literally fall off the water molecule, whether it's the Santa Rosa aquifer out in the Permian Basin or whether it's Gulf Coast water. It can be a lot less expensive to do some things. And those kinds of the advent of those kinds of technologies are going to help us deal with the future issues of funding these problems.
Very good. Anybody else have any comments before we go to questions?
Let's talk about how regionalism is working right now. Aquifers are not localized, first of all, but neither are surface water systems as a general rule. If you look at what San Angelo, Abilene, and Midland are working together to develop and deliver water together. CRMWA is 11 client cities, all the way from the size of Lubbock to O'Donnell. Look at all the client cities of CRMWD that benefit from that lake system, benefit, by the way, from long time and very effective planning. Regionalism is key to both the planning planning process and certainly the funding process in years to come. But it's being done. There's a model for it right now today, and it's a good one.
It's worked in West Texas
Yeah.
for sure. Representative King.
One comment on conservation, we've talked about it a lot, but the Department of Agriculture, which is in the group that works on water issues, of course, has their Water Smart, which is a public-private consortium to push the message of conservation. And it's the simple things that don't cost a lot of money that everyone can do that are so important. And Todd Staples has really taken the lead on that. But it's very important. I read a little bitty thing, I guess, in the water plan at the town of Electra, and they said that in 2000 they were very close to being completely out of water. And one of their measures was they suggested to their citizens to not flush until you would use the facility 5 times. Now that's pretty intense. But in fact,
That's a good way to put it.
What I would say is that perhaps if every community realizes now, you don't want a state mandate on conservation and what the parameters are. You don't want water police coming in and citing you. So if everyone would now today, just like we talked about starting these projects, begin a conservation plan that everyone can buy into, perhaps that'll help in some way. We do have water police in Abilene. Well, not with law enforcement, but code enforcement people. If you're caught watering and it's not your day, we have 1 day a week where we're allowed, just 1. So I'm curious about other towns that may have a mandatory restriction like that. We certainly do.
We do too.
All right, very good. Anything else before?
Well,
Yes.
the only thing I would say, Senator, is when I was on the Regional Planning Committee, and we'd have a project like the Shirt-Seguin project that came forward, where 2 cities were working together, or when GBRA and San Antonio Water Systems were working together on projects. I think the consensus of the group was to give those a higher priority, because it was not only encompassing the benefit of more people, but it was showing a cooperative effort. So I just would agree with what everybody says about that. I mean, certainly your regional planning committee members might have a different perspective, but I think that's just common sense, and I think that probably happens more times than not, a lot more times than not.
Very good.
Senator, one thing I'd say, in the Water Development Board, they have what's called the Texas Water Infrastructure Coordination Committee, and that's TWICC. And they will help communities research the various funds that are available to a community. And that might be something that people would be interested in looking at, because they can coordinate. Many times it's not just the Water Development Board, maybe it's another agency that might have money for them. And so the TWICC is a good resource for communities to access.
Very good. I think another source too is your House and Senate members.
Yes.
As far as what we can do is, our job is to plug you in to those sorts of things, and so I want to make sure that everybody realizes that's part of what we do. Yes. And that's part of it. It's not all just going down there and having fun voting on easy issues. It's about serving our communities, and this West Texas delegation does a really good job of working together on, especially on these regional issues, and that's I really enjoyed the conversation we had on that. Why don't we open it up to some questions?
Senator, while it is, and just go to the point there, keep talking about the West Texas folks, is just so everybody keeps in mind, and sometimes we forget about this, is about 15 years or so ago that the legislature flipped from a rural legislature to an urban legislature. So we have got to be together on these issues. I was vice chairman of the Rural Caucus. Our chairman, Hardcastle, will not be returning, but we were there to work together and promote rural issues for Texas. So I think we've got to keep that in mind, that we'd better be together, because we got some other people that are looking at money and looking at projects that are going to suck up a lot of resources.
And I think the caucus has been very effective too, and it has done a really nice job. And of course, in the Senate, we're not much better on our side. You're looking at West Texas right now up here on the stage. So bottom line is, it's a tough row. But again, we've been successful, and I think the key is you just look at. I want to look at some of the metrics of what this part of the state produces in the gross state product, what rural Texas produces. If you talk about the minerals and agriculture and the different manufacturing concerns, CAFOs that we have up in your part of the world, and it'd be amazing what we produce in West Texas and in rural Texas generally for the gross state product is enormous. Any questions?
We've worn them out, Senator.
Well, I think you did such a good job of answering their questions in your speeches that you didn't do anything. Well, thank you very much. A great panel. Let's clap for the panel.